us from Boulder, Colorado. Today has been an epic struggle just to get from, or to get to Salt Lake City and then to get from Salt Lake City here. I sorry, I have had a couple of drinks because it's the only way to deal with this. But yeah, I've just had my one and only meal of the day. But it was quite a epic just to get here to Boulder. So anyway, here I am, and here you are. And so, without any further ado, we are going to deal with the Laurie Vallow case. Welcome to the regulars here. Also, welcome to some new faces. I'll speak to you guys in a bit more detail later on. I will obviously chatter after we've sort of dealt with the script, and then we can sort of speak a little bit informally. For now, though, welcome, and we're going to be dealing with the in a way, what I'm doing is a review of the Dateline documentary, but I'm also going to be providing some of my own input in terms of that, some of my own interpretation. So if you have seen it or you haven't seen it, I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts which you perhaps haven't thought about or seen elsewhere. So hopefully it's going to have some worth. Just quickly, Rochelle, good to see you. PJR, thanks a lot for that. Elizabeth, thank you. Sharon says, welcome to Colorado. Gwen, Cornelia, Mel, Sally, Gloria, Brian, Cornelia, Gwen, good to see all of you. Loris as well. So according to the vote, make sure you vote if you haven't already, but according to the vote, 60% of you haven't seen the docu-series or the documentary. So before I get started with it, those who did see it, what did you think of it? Those who did see it, what did you think of how it was put together? What did you think of Nate's contribution? What did you think of the whole thing? Just deal with a couple of quick comments. By the way, Stephanie, thank you for letting everybody know that I hadn't forgotten about the live. I just needed, it's like an emergency. I haven't eaten all day, and so I quickly just got something to eat. Brian says this will be worth the wait. Sharon says it was excellent, Nate especially. Sharon says hi from Indiana. By the way, Boulder's quite smoky. I was also wondering, like, why is Salt Lake City so smoky? Is it the salt? What's going on? And there are apparently huge fires in Canada that are blowing over. So looks like I headed not quite south, but a little bit further just in time. Gloria says that 48 Hours has done a show on Laurie as well. I've seen part of it. Catherine says, interesting to see a few parts I wasn't aware of. Okay. Stay hydrated. Chelsea says, I always enjoy Keith Morrison's episodes. Don't you sometimes get the feeling when Keith Morrison narrates, it sounds like he's telling you a fairy tale? It's almost like he doesn't necessarily say once upon a time in that sort of golden voice of his, but it's almost like he does. He sort of sketches out the happy story, and then something went wrong. But he tells the story in quite a fairy tale way, And I think that's what some people like about it. Sharon says, I saw your video with Nate. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, thank you to all those of you who subscribed after watching that. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's get going. So as I say, I'm going to come back and deal with you guys and talk a bit more informally, but we had 5 minutes in, let's kind of get going. So last night, actually it's not last night now because this was meant to I meant to do this last night. 2 nights ago, from a hotel in Hurricane, Utah, I watched the Dateline documentary, The Trial of Lori Velo de Bell, right? After an almost 8-minute intro and recap by Keith Morrison, he finally asked the rhetorical question, what happened? And, it's such a short, simple question. What happened? Those of you who've been following this case day in and day out, breathlessly following every tweet, every news story, are you able to say, are you able to answer that question? What happened? Just that. What happened? Alina, good to see you here. Lynn Lippy, good to see you as well. Kerry, thanks for that. What happened? See what you guys say. Elizabeth says that's what we all want to know. But before I provide my assessment, are some of you able to say in a nutshell, what did happen? Like, what does it come down to? Gloria says, sick love. Is that what happened? I mean, is that not the same as what you've seen in, say, the Chris Watts case? Sherry says, do we really know what happened? Well, I would say that we do. The question is, can we distill it? Can we put it all together in something that's cogent? Well, I think when you say what happened, you are part of the answer is why did it happen, right? Okay, selfishness, greed, and so on. Elizabeth says the ugly facts, yes, but nothing really fully answers it. Stephen says she was brainwashed by a cult. Was she brainwashed by a cult, or was she also instrumental in the brainwashing? Lynn Lippy says what happened is pride and greed ultimately. So for those of you who are sitting here like, you know what, we still don't know what happened. Do we really know? I really want you guys to take out your notebooks, because this live hopefully is going to address some of those answers. I don't want to say once and for all, but hopefully you're going to come away from this with a very clear sense of what did happen. Okay. Have a look at the picture that is on screen right now. Let me take myself out of it. And what you see there are all sorts of iterations of Lori Velo, right? You see her at different ages. You see her children at different stages. You see different family scenarios. But there are sort of different Loris at different times. Thou shalt not kill true crimes. It got linked to your channel. Much respect for your work. Thank you. Okay. So simple questions are sometimes tough to answer, but especially they're tough to answer simply. When Nate Eaton he asked me outside the court, why are you here? I guess the simplest answer was, because this is what I do, right? So sometimes you want to think about in essence, what is the question about, and then also, in essence, what answers that question? What is the essence of the answer to the essential question? At the time when you're immersed in a case, and this is related to a lot of other true crime cases, when you're immersed in it, when you're involved in it, when you're overwhelmed with all of the information, it's easy to lose perspective. Sometimes perspective is just not forthcoming. And I feel like I'm ready to impart some perspective in the Laurie Vallow case that might help you guys. So when we ask a simple but not easy, it's a simple question. That doesn't mean it's an easy question. When you ask that question, what happened? What happened with reference to Laurie Vallow? What happened with reference to the Doomsday Mom case? Again, can we provide a simple answer? Now, Keith Morrison, and so I'm kind of taking my cue from what he says, he says he reckons the story really started in St. George, Utah. So if you're saying what happened, one way to sort of address what happened is to say, well, where did it happen? Where did it start? Right? To be able to understand what happened, you need to be able to say, well, these are the parameters of the story. It starts here. This is really the box within which the box that contains the whole story, right? St. George, Utah, and I actually drove past it yesterday, is where Laurie and Chad first met. They didn't just meet there, and they were at a preppers conference, so they were both already caught up in that whole psychology, and they were like fire and gasoline. And you can imagine, if just put yourself in that scenario, one prepper meets another prepper, and they equally caught up in quite an extreme way of looking at things. No wonder they're going to be attracted to one another. And so they were like fire and gasoline. Nate Eaton describes their meeting as a fatal attraction, and it certainly was. But why was it a fatal attraction? We put up this image. Why was it a fatal attraction? So I've addressed this question, why this case is the most serious case I've dealt with thus far as a true crime writer and researcher. I've kind of touched on it before, and I don't feel like I've dealt with it as eloquently or effectively as I've wanted to. And so I'm hoping that in this analysis, it will be the most effective that I have dealt with, and hopefully it'll help you guys to be like, so this is what it is about. Let me ask you guys a question before we continue. Do you agree that this is the most serious true crime case we've ever dealt with? It's the most egregious and horrifying case that you've ever seen in true crime. Do you agree with that, or do you think that's overstating things? So there are quite a few saying yes. Chelsea Slims. Kathy says I do. Claudelia, if you want to just Google Dateline Laurie Vallow, you should find it. Katie says yes, next to Laurie Vallow. So most of you seem to say it's the worst. I'm surprised that it's not a much higher profile case than it is. I was surprised that people were covering the Letitia Storr case when you've got a mother who conspired to murder not one child but two, also her partner's husband, also her own husband, also attempted murder, etc., etc., etc. I was just surprised. I thought that was quite strange. And I suppose you could say, because true crime said, well, there are no cameras in the courtroom, so it doesn't matter how horrible this case is, we're not going to really pay attention to it, because what content are we going to have? Well, the content of the court case, the words of the court case. Yeah, also brother. Okay, good to see you, Slims. Good to see you. Okay, so let me Just want to make this sort of a little bit bigger. Look at Laurie in this image. Look at how she actually looks quite stunning. Look at the golden hair, and it's quite hard to imagine that's the same person in her booking photo. Look how kind of toned she is, and she's kind of got charisma because the lady interviewing her ends up convinced by her story. And I don't think her story is terribly convincing. I just think she's quite a confident, kind of a confidence trickster. So I'm going to say something that may disturb some of you. I would say that this case even eclipses the mass shootings I've covered, right? Let me say that again. In my opinion, this case, Terry Dean, good to see you here. In this case even eclipses the mass shootings I've covered. And what I'm talking about isn't you don't simply say because 10 people died or 20 people died or 30 people died, that's how you measure it. That's part of how you measure it. The other part is just how far does the criminal psychology, that sort of dark abyss of evil, if you will, but that dark cloud, how far does that sort of poison extend to other people? You know, to what extent does the criminal psychology in a particular case contaminate another person and another person and another person, right? And it's kind of in that sense that I find this case particularly troubling and terrifying. That's a good point. Bridget says, sorry, where's that comment? Toggle Tran, thank you for that. There's a comment that I quite liked here. Yeah, it is from Not Sure. I like this comment. I feel like a lot of people who were involved in this have not been charged. Okay. That's right. That's right. But Joe, the kind of question is, why did it make it troubling, right? So coming back to this idea that how can this actually eclipse a mass shooting, right? Thanks a lot, Liesel. What do you say there? Commitment to the underpinnings of these crimes and by extension humanity. Yeah. And I must say that is one thing about this crime that is quite interesting, is how it reaches out into our common humanity and says, we're gonna save you. This is how we're going to save the world. And then how? Well, by murdering people, by turning people into zombies. It's like someone saying, I'm going to save you. Well, how? Well, by killing people that aren't part of our group. You're going to belong to someone, to something. How? Well, don't worry. Someone else is going to die, but you'll be okay. And so all the other things don't really matter. Is that good enough? Sherry says, this criminal psychology trumps most, definitely. Okay, so let's continue. So although I think it's true that the scale of criminal psychology in this case is off the charts, I think what's been a problem, I'm a narrator, I've written lots of books, I've obviously covered true crime for a long time. I've studied the law, I'm very interested in the human condition. Although I think the scale of criminal psychology, and it's easy to dismiss it and say it's crazy, it's nuts, it's whatever. But actually, somebody believed it and committed murder, and again and again. And some of those people who believed in this nuts stuff was actually the police. In other words, you can say whatever you like about Laurie, but they believed her, the police believed her and Alex, and they didn't believe, for example, Charles. let me say that again. You might dismiss Laurie as nuts or crazy or something like that, but the police in the beginning didn't really accept what Charles was saying. I think they thought there was something wrong with him. And just have a look at the pictures, the faces in this picture of the police. Look at this guy in the middle here. Does he look like he believes Charles? Look at the guy next to him. Look at this lady here on the left. Do any of those faces seem to be like, okay, I think what you're saying makes sense, right? And so ultimately, Charles, although he was murdered, the police basically accepted that he wasn't and that it was self-defense. Again, terrifying. Imagine if you were murdered and your murderer said, "Oh no, 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 you did this," and then it wasn't investigated just on someone else's charisma. Elise says very complex dynamics within the criminal psychology of Laurie, and she had so much to unravel as to how we ended up here. Okay. So the difficulty is I don't think even I was able to explain simply why that was. Why is this off the charts? What are we dealing with here? Why is the criminal psychology off the charts? And you can't say it's crazy or it's nuts. Why is it at such an extreme level, right? And so I did mention this before. The body count is an oversimplification. You don't say because so many died, the criminal psychology is that, although sometimes that is an indication. It's not just the body count here. The body count is one aspect. The fact that it was her own children is another aspect. The fact that, and this is the answer to the thing, the fact that Laurie recruited others to do her dirty work, others to be an angel of death, is closer to the answer to why this is such a shocking and disturbing case. In other words, she figured a way to convince other people to do to participate in criminal activity. Would you mind killing my child for me on my behalf? Would you mind killing that person for me on my behalf? Okay, no, I will. And so that's the scary part, is how does that actually happen? And that is exactly what Charles was dealing with. My wife is trying to kill me. Can you help me? Well, but nobody believes it. But they believe her when she tells a story. Other people believe her when she says Charles must die. So what's the difference here? Why do the cops not believe Charles, but they believe Laurie, right? So now I'm going to kind of I sort of set up the narrative, if I can put it that way. I've introduced to you the problem, and like what is actually going on here. It's not just a high profile case, it's not just whatever. Something serious is going on here. What is it? And like I say, even I was struggling to figure it out. And I had an epiphany yesterday while I was driving um, through some of, let's call them the milestones um, of the Laurie Vallow case. I was driving past St. George, where Laurie and Chad's Doomsday romance started. But instead of like thinking about them, I actually wasn't. I was driving through Utah. Um, so almost like in the rear view mirror, even like in the sort of glancing off the sides of the window of the vehicle I was driving, um, like receding into the background is the sort of impression of Well, they went to a Doomsday. They went to a prepping conference over there, and they're the sign passes you in 2018. But I'm not even paying attention to that. I'm not really even looking at that when I have this epiphany. And the epiphany came to me as the best epiphanies do when I wasn't thinking about the Laurie Vallow case as well. Like there's something about sometimes when you try to remember something, you can't remember it. When you let go of it, it sort of comes to you. Sometimes dreams are like that as well. You wake up and you know you dreamt a dream and you try and remember it, and kind of when you let it go, it sort of sneaks back and says, well, this is actually what you were dreaming. I'm not trying to say I had a vision, just that I had an epiphany. So I was kind of way beyond St. George, but not quite as far as Rexburg, Idaho. Although I actually went to Rexburg a few weeks ago. I actually drove through there. Some of that footage is in some of the videos that I've put up. I was somewhere on the road to Salt Lake City. This was 2 days ago. If we include today, when it struck me, and the answer came to me by not trying to figure out who Laurie was, but by grieving and remembering someone Laurie wasn't. So almost by paying attention to someone that's nothing like her, I kind of realized who she is or who she was or what we're dealing with. So this is quite personal, and I guess it's the only way to really analyze this is by getting quite personal. Can you guys let me do this? Can you guys see that? I'm going to explain that in a moment. Just see some of your comments. Crystal Acreage has finally caught you live. So that man on your screen, again, if this sounds personal, self-indulgent, or emotional, I apologize, but I do have a point with it. Last Sunday, a community of runners. So this kind of harkens to back home, to where I'm from. Somebody died, and he was our coach. Every Tuesday I would run intervals, and he would support us and encourage us, and he would organize a lot of these things. And he fostered a camaraderie around strangers. Out of sort of nobody and nothing, he created this small group of runners who became a bigger group, who kind of became a family. And he didn't do it for money, and he didn't do it for anything. He did it out of, I don't know, love of running, and I guess he recognized that his support could make a difference. I ran with this group every Tuesday until I got injured, and I personally felt his encouragement. He would, if you were doing intervals and you did a good time, he would sort of say, "Well done," and he would sort of say it like that. And I would feel that support. You would feel how that encouragement boosted you, right? And so did everybody else. So this is another picture of him. That's his wife next to him. So his name's Leon. When he lost his life to cancer last week, it made the news. So it's not like he made the news because he murdered someone, because he took someone's life, but because he gave life to so many people, because he enriched people's lives in such an amazing way. Because the loss of his life is a real loss to a society he's given so much to. Can you see how I couldn't help thinking about him, because he had such an impact on my life and on the lives. I saw the impact he had on other people's lives. I saw how he created this group of us that became bigger and bigger. And and then you sort of think, after dwelling on that, you think about Laurie Vallow and you think, what did she do? So as I say, I was thinking about Leon. I realized precisely why Laurie's criminal psychology is so serious. There are people who mean a lot to us because they build our communities. Do you know anyone in your life, in your community, that's someone like that? It's either a friend or somebody you know, or someone in another town or something like that. But it's a person who just, for whatever reason, took it upon themselves to contribute, and they don't get anything back. They don't ask for money, and they don't ask for. They basically just give of themselves. They give their time and their energy and their attention, right? Some of you say my mother, and some of you say I do know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that, right? But the point is, people that mean a lot to us, um, to some extent, they've reached out to us, but that reaching out to other people, and they're building our communities. They're creating a stronger and stronger glue. They're making it fun and enjoyable and nice and good to be part of a group. And it's real. It's not like, this is a community on YouTube, right? And that's real in its own way. But I'm talking about where people come face to face. And whereas in the beginning you just share your names, now you actually give one another hugs and you ask and you get to know these people who used to be complete strangers. And within the context of running, but it's nevertheless a very real camaraderie that develops. And he was someone who just I guess, put it all together. Toggle transit. I know tons of people at my church that are real and generous. Paige says some people are the glue of their group, family, community. People are drawn to them. Haven't you noticed sometimes a school, like in high school, your head boy or your head girl, there's often something that is just strangely selfless about them, that they care a lot about other people, including like someone that's not very popular. There's just something about them where they notice people that other people don't notice. They notice the popular people and they notice those that aren't popular. They are basically humanists. They care about other human beings and they really create better societies, right? So what these individuals do is they make a society that we like to be and want to belong to. In other words, these people come along and you realize, well, I like that person and I like the people that are being drawn to that person. And I want to belong to that as well. And you know what? There's no membership. You don't have to pay any fee. You just need to show up. And again, it's a real society in the real world. There's real reaching out, real warmth, real development. There's not like a selfish thing of, well, I would like this or I would like that or whatever. It's simply giving, and and then there's the growing of this community where people, I guess, are encouraged to give of themselves and be friendly and that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is, while I was driving through, here I am in America, and the news reaches me of this guy's death, and he died on, I think, the 16th. And here I am thinking about him. I'm thinking about the last time I saw him, the last things we said, the way he was smiling, the just all of the little moments that we shared, the moments that he shared with others that one witnessed. So if this, and his name, as I say, was Leon, if Leon built a community, if he brought people together with a positive, life-giving, health-enhancing, consistent message, if he did so selflessly, then can you see Laurie did the opposite? Let me say that again. If Leon, this guy in my life, and again, try and think about someone like this in your life. If he brought people together with a positive, truly positive, life-giving, health-enhancing, consistent message, if he did so selflessly, he never asked money for his coaching. I don't think I ever gave him any money. I don't know anyone who did, um, unless you were buying a T-shirt that to be part of the running club, but you didn't need one to be part of the running club. Anyway, the point is, Laurie did the opposite to that. Now think about this. Think about this in a very clear way. Laurie put together a community for her own enhancement. Laurie put together a community that was always going to be one person at the expense of another. If I belong to this community, if you belong to this community, if that person opposes us, we've got to kill them. We've got to get rid of them. We've got to dismiss them. And, if you think about it, it wasn't entirely right to be not have terribly good feelings towards Melanie Gibb. Wasn't her mother changing in front of her very eyes into someone that she perhaps didn't really like very much, kind of a fruitcake, someone didn't make a lot of sense? Wasn't what Tylee was seeing something that wasn't positive, wasn't life-giving, wasn't health-enhancing, wasn't consistent? I mean, think about how inconsistent it is to say, like Laurie would say to Chad, Tylee's behaving really badly, blah, blah, blah. And then, so she must have an evil spirit. And then when Tylee's behaving really well, well, now she really must have an evil spirit as well. So it's a totally inconsistent message. If one person is light, another is dark. In our running group, there's no discrimination. Basically, if you showed up, you were welcome. If one person, this is in terms of Laurie, if one person was delivered, another was an obstacle. Laurie's Doomsday cult was designed to destroy or oppose anyone who wasn't part of it. So that is getting a lot closer to addressing that question. What happened? Well, Laurie designed a cult designed to destroy anyone who was opposed to it. In other words, anyone who was opposed to her. She kind of formed a cult around herself. And is she the only person who's done that? Is she the only person where if you disagree with her, then you are the enemy? Aren't we seeing that quite a lot in our everyday lives? If you disagree with me, you're the enemy. What? I just disagree with you. How am I the enemy? Her doomsday cult brought people together with the intention to destroy other people. That's really kind of the bottom line here, right? She created a cult with the intention to destroy other people. It's like, what is life enhancing about that? What is life enhancing about the destruction of other human beings? Let's think about that day after day. Let's pray about that day after day. Let's focus on that. Let's persist in what number can we allocate to this person who's kind of going down the drain. Let's fixate on how a person is slowly going over to the dark side. Think about all the alternatives that there could be. Can't we save them? How can we bring light onto them instead of casting spells that do whatever? Isn't there a way we can maybe help the person, give them a hug, take them out for coffee? Um, Instead it's, well, I'm going to judge you and I'm going to destroy you. Not sure why Marianne has put up so many of the same comments. But think about it. She brings together people with the intention of destroying other people, including family members, which is why so much of their interactions focus on deciding whether someone is this or that number. In other words, how close they are to being taken out. Anyone who was identified as, now what I'm telling you now is like, it's kind of cerebral, and it's kind of, how can I put it? It's true, but we need to be practical about what we're talking about. I'm going to do that in a moment. You'll see what I mean when I do that. But just in a broad way, anyone who is identified as an obstacle was treated as part of the collateral damage and imminent carnage of Doomsday. Now think about that attitude with a running group. Like someone who's maybe a competitor to you, so someone you're running, maybe you do a running competition with and they beat you. Do you treat them now as an obstacle? Must the whole group of runners beat that person to death because they some kind of threat to you? Obviously not. You're all collectively trying to be better, right? So the thing that I think is really interesting here, which is also so much more in this case than in other cases, you have deaths that are not just expendable, but they're in service to Laurie. But the crazy part is, in service how? Well, in service to her godness, in service to her divine whatever, whatever, whatever. That's totally different from, if you think about like, so Chris Watts wants to marry or wants to have an affair with Nicole Kessinger, right? So he sees certain lives as expendable, but he's not killing someone in service to himself so that he can be some kind of God figure. That's the difference here. She was trying to kill people in service to herself and then also get money from them. And that then creates this sort of fear cycle where as soon as you're not in that program, then you risk being regarded as a zombie and you might die as well. So you're part of a community, but if you dare stray, well, aren't you gonna be too scared to leave that community lest something happens to you? So you're really voluntarily part of this community. What makes the Laurie Vallow case so serious is that instead of building a community, so if you think about it, the one side of it is, Doomsday cult. She puts together, her and Chad put together a group of people, not a very big group, but put together a group of people. But she creates a community that's intended to destroy the fabric of her own society. And I think you could even just say it in a general way. This person created a community that was intended to destroy the fabric of society, to say, we have the I don't know, the gummy bear, the magic potion to save the human race, the entire human race. We've got the special I don't know, magic bullet, and only 144,000 are going to be, we're going to take care of you, but the rest, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, Millions, tens of millions, billions can die, and that's okay. It's not okay. But in terms of this psychology, it's saying we're going to create a community within this total cataclysm. And it's great if there's a total cataclysm because that's going to help us create this community. No, it's not great. Let me say that again. She created a community that was intended to destroy the fabric of her own society. And just think about it, that's exactly what it did. It destroyed her family, it destroyed her extended family, it destroyed somebody else's family, it destroyed somebody else's extended family. So it's not like just I'm killing you and blah, blah, blah. It's actually I'm creating a group of people who will be potentially weaponized to destroy whoever I say. That is what makes this so evil, if that's the word you want to use. That is what makes the criminal psychology here so severe. And can you see how it's an epiphany where you thinking about someone who truly built a society that you belong to, who truly was a warm, loving, giving person, right? Who created out of society a society that was more knitted together, a society that was more reinforced and glued to one another. You've got somebody else who's creating distrust and discord and destruction. It's someone creating a society with the intention to destroy society. Can you see just how nefarious that is? So if you ask the question, what happened? Can you see how that is the answer? Someone created a society with the intention of destroying society. Willow says urbanity is mind blowing. Is it becoming clear what I'm saying, that you can see it kind of in a nutshell? Jeepers, this is what we're talking about. Are you getting? Am I conveying that epiphany to you, where you're going, "Oh, I see what you're talking about." The terror here is that there were several people who were susceptible to this. The part that I think I find the most disturbing, like you normally deal with a criminal who they get infected with their own criminal psychology. They get caught up in all the dynamics. Now you've got somebody else who's infecting somebody else. Those people aren't really in any kind of dynamic other than the beliefs that they have. But I mean, you barely know someone. If you look at Zulima, you barely know that person. You just say this, that, and the next thing, and the next thing, that person's totally on board. It's shocking, it's scary. And then there's also Alex Cox, who was susceptible, but there were other people as well. There were several people who went along with it. Where are they now? Even the people who kind of oppose, even people who appeared in this documentary, and I personally find it kind of, there's a saying in Afrikaans that it gets stuck in your throat. I find it a bit objectionable that someone will appear in a documentary and say quite a few things, but then when they're in court, they hardly say anything. I don't know. That's just my view. I don't know. It's like it is an important question. Do you know what is so scary, Elizabeth? Is this idea of Hitler and Mussolini emerging amongst us? That in your neighborhood, someone is sort of coming up out of your neighborhood that is these destructive psychologies. Just somebody right there. you know. Okay. Now, coming back to Leon, let me just bring him back over here. At Leon's funeral, there was an army of well wishers. There was family, friends. I would have been there if I was in South Africa. There were people who simply rubbed shoulders with him, who simply wanted to say, you know what, you were a good guy. I experienced that as well. Um, Compare that, and I was in court. I was in court wondering where Laurie's support was. You had the one side of the court dedicated to the prosecution's case, and then the defense side, you sort of saw Chad's lawyer sitting there, and virtually nobody else, just bare benches. During the verdict, was there anyone there to support Laurie during arguably the most important moment of her life? It seems like anyone who had supported Laurie is now too embarrassed to admit it. That's pretty inconsistent, wouldn't you say? You know, it's also pretty inconsistent to be a mother dealing with the doomsday cult thing, and then your children disappear, but now you've got nothing to say about it. She had a lot to say about why Charles died, and people believed her. Why did she not have that much to say about Kylie and JJ? So the lesson we learn from the Vallow case is that people are open to persuasion, more so than I think we realize. I'm going to put this picture on screen. People are open to persuasion more than we realize, and some people are less open to persuasion than we realize. Again, look at this lady's face. I thought this was on. Okay, so is it on? Well, guys, I need to plug in my laptop. I thought it was plugged in, but it's evidently not. It's flashing, so I'm kind of running against time. Not sure what to do. It's gonna work. So I've pulled out the television plug. Sorry, this is a fairly old hotel. It's not even a refrigerator where I'm staying. Terry says she looks skeptical at best. Yuri is actually, in a way, he doesn't know it, but he's actually pleading for his life. He's trying to explain what Laurie really is doing. He's not lying to the police. He's telling the police exactly what Laurie is doing, and they just don't believe him. And they'll believe her even after he's dead. He talks to other police, and they don't believe him either. Yeah, that is also very true. And I think a part that I think you don't hear spoken about very much is to what extent is the true crime community told things that they want to hear and they believe things they want to believe, but they're not actually true. but nobody really cares because you belong to a community. Isn't that kind of like a cult as well? Think about and I know what some of you will say, think about the Kylie Rodney case, where everyone wanted you to believe that she was murdered. And if you didn't believe that, you didn't belong. But and then you sort of say, well, I don't really care what the truth is. I want to be part of the community that believe X, Y, Z. But doesn't reality matter? And look at who you have on the screen here. Look at Charles trying to say, can you understand what I'm telling you? This person is doing that, that, and that. You know what? I don't know if I really want to believe this. You're a man saying that you're afraid of your wife. Let me get this straight. You're a big guy and you're afraid of a woman. And then guess what? He's murdered. And then two children are murdered. And then there's still not any sense that Laurie did anything wrong. Think about that. Her husband's murdered, her two children are murdered or disappear. And there's still a sense of, well, it could be anything. And even Charles's death doesn't necessarily mean anything. So how many murders do need to take place before you start going, maybe the clues that came to me right in the beginning when the person said to me, this is what's going on, I didn't pay attention to those. Okay. One society is okay with the idea of destroying another as long as they benefit. And what I'm trying to convey here is the takeout that we're supposed to get from this case, which I think is so valuable, which is, don't we know any people that are Laurie Vallows? Don't we know any people that are destroying society and benefiting from that? Don't we know people that criticize others in order to benefit themselves? But I mean, criticize others in a way that's not deserved. Don't we know people that spread lies that people are willingly believe that make themselves more popular within a true crime space? And I think the true crime space is quite interesting because you sometimes have this antagonistic thing of one group says this and another group says that. Shouldn't we be all holding hands and saying, let's try and find out what happened here? Is that such a hard thing to do? To say, let's figure out what happened here. And there was a wonderful moment in the Gabby Petito case where it felt like everyone was doing that. The media, social media, true crime creators, the public, everyone seemed to be working together to try and figure out what had happened to Gabby. So let me read this again. The lesson we learned from the Vallow case is that people are open to persuasion. One society is okay with the idea of destroying another as long as they benefit. One society is willing to follow a leader who delivers them from evil as long as everyone else is evil. As long as you say everyone else is evil, that's fine. And now I want to take you through an inversion. This comes directly from that documentary, right? This is I thought a good strong moment out of that documentary, and this is where we kind of get practical with it. Do you remember the moment when Charles spoke to law enforcement and he straight up tried to explain? This is it. You see it on screen. What Laurie was saying and doing. Again, look at the officer's face on the left of this image. Look at her face. Do you think she's saying I believe you, or do you think she's saying I don't believe you? Yes, she is again, and it's not just her, but it's the same face. Do you think they believe him? And so again, the question comes up. You say, what happened? It wasn't just that Laurie Vallow um, tried to do certain things. It's also that people were convinced by what she said. Why? Why were people convinced by what she said? Why are people so easily convinced? Not sure says Charles comes off as crazy trying to explain Laurie's beliefs. It's difficult to make the explanation he's making without sounding crazy, right? Anyway, after Charles was murdered, he was shot once. He was shot not once but twice. Even after he's murdered, he's come to them with a story. Even after he's murdered, they still seem to think, well, even though he spoke to us that day, um, we don't believe him. That's the one bullet, and this is the other bullet. And doesn't it speak volumes that he was shot twice? If you're trying to defend yourself, why do you need to shoot somebody twice? Someone who doesn't have a gun in their hand, why do you need to shoot them twice? Someone who's lying on the floor, why do you need to shoot them twice? So what you see is just how easily Laurie, Tylee, and Alex convinced those, and I don't know if you could really include Alex, but you do see him talking to the police, and ultimately they did convince, all three of them convinced those around them of the face value of things. And how did that happen? So this is another answer, I think quite a simple and quite a effective and profound answer to the question of what happened. Is you see just how easy in this instance, um, how easily Laurie, Tylee, and Alex convince law enforcement and those around them, their family, um, of the face value of things. Oh, there was an argument. Oh, this happened. Oh, okay. Is that what you said? Okay, that's fine. Words are good enough for me, right? A good point, Kat. Good to see you here. But what I'm kind of getting at, I don't know if you guys see this. What I'm kind of getting at is it's really on the strength that three people say the same thing. Laurie says something, her daughter says something, and Alex says something. And because three people say the same thing, it must be true. That is how cults form. Um, I'm quite astonished sometimes when I'm covering true crime and I go on to someone's analysis of Madeleine McCann or whatever. Like I think quite a good example is I was looking at Megyn Kelly's interview of John Ramsey, and I was reading the comments below that, and every single one, every single comment was in the same vein. I'm not going to say in which way. That is how easy it is to convince everybody of something that isn't necessarily true. If you just have enough people saying the same thing. Oh, and so enough people saying the same thing, and then everyone else is like a sheep. Well, I don't actually need to know the merits of the case. I just need to know that there are enough people that are already following something. So I'll follow it as well. You see what I'm saying? What happened is that there were just enough people saying the same thing for other people to believe it without needing any evidence. You know how much of, and somebody just said that here, you know how much of politics is based on that? You know how much of truth and reality is simply based on getting a certain statement or idea to trend. It's not whether it's true or not, just enough people saying the same thing. And again, what I'm trying to emphasize here is how terrifyingly easy it is to get people that don't even know each other to do horrible things to each other. You just have to convince them that you part of a group and your group is under threat, and some other group is either bigger than you or represents some kind of threat to you, and now you need to take some other action. Wow, that was easy, right? And what's the antidote to that? You don't have a label for one group or another. You have shared interests. Aren't we all human beings? Don't we all care about something similar? Aren't we all part of the same society? Or do we want to destroy that society so that our society can be better off? How's that going to work? How's our society going to be better off by destroying a society that we decide we don't agree with? Well, what if that society decides they don't like us? Quid pro quo. Can you see? I'm trying to take the poison that's in this story and show you how current and topical it is in our everyday lives. So coming back to Charles, when the cops ask what happened, just think about this from a reality perspective. The cops ask Alex what happened. He doesn't say anything about God or Ned Schneider or demons. That doesn't come out at all. When Tylee's asked about that, she doesn't say anything about that. When Laurie's asked about that, she doesn't say anywhere ever that there's a demon aspect or that they've been praying. None of that comes up. Why don't they say any of that stuff? None of them say anything about their own beliefs. In other words, they con the cops based on a story that at face value makes sense. In other words, all three of us are saying the same thing: self-defense. That's an appeal to a certain level of morality. That's an appeal to a certain level of justice. But what about the other story? The fact that you were praying and casting things and that actually and you know, Kylie, do you know your mom's having an affair? You know that in the midst of your dad's death, your mom's having an affair. Alex, do you know your sister's having an affair? In the middle of him having an affair with Chad, this guy's dying. This guy's dead. Do you know anything about the insurance money? Is that ever being talked about? No, 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 no. Let's just talk about the face value thing, that if I hear it, that's enough to convince me. And it's that same thing is applied so often. You see it in social media, you see it in politics. You rob the thing that you're trying to convince someone of its true context. Actually, Laurie's having an affair in the middle of this. Actually, Laurie has actually changed a lot in the middle of this. Actually, who is being going crazy here, Charles or Laurie? Actually this, actually that. No, 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 no. Let's just tell this little square of the story and rob it of all the rest of the context. You seeing that going on a lot in other stories that get people riled up, and people accept them at face value. which is why the antidote to that is, what is the context of this story? Okay, great. This is really upsetting, but what's the broader context? Okay. So that's the context. When Alex was asked, and this came out in the Dateline documentary, and I thought this was done quite well, where they did some analysis and they saw the discrepancy. Alex was asked, what was he doing at Laurie's house? It's a good question. And he said he was simply there to hang out. Remember that? Those who watched this documentary. He said he's simply there to hang out. Do you remember that was highlighted? So that's not what Laurie said. Laurie said, I need him here to protect me. So why is he saying, oh, I was just here to hang out? Laurie also convinced the officer that she was explaining her situation to her, that she was the victim, and I thought it was quite nicely done how that was made explicit. That Laurie comes out of the. Let me just bring myself back for a moment. In the, like, when you watch that police interview, Laurie seems to be trying not to laugh. When you see her on the body cam, and she sort of makes a joke in the, like, it's the crime has just happened. She kind of like, hi, sorry neighbors, like she's kind of saying, um, someone's just gotten shot. Wonder what the neighbors think about that. Kind of thing. Um, I think somebody used the term jocular, that Laurie's got this sort of jocular aspect, that she laughs about everything. And that has obviously worked for her in the past. It worked for her as a kind of a pageant person, and through her 5 marriages, right? People who smile seem to be self-assured, right? Um, yeah, Charles did seem like a good man. But the point is, you've got this person whose husband has just been shot to death, and she doesn't shed a tear, but she still kind of emerges as the victim. Do you follow my reasoning? She's actually just like, we know this now. She triumphed. She wanted Charles dead. Charles was killed. Charles is dead. She's now being asked what happened. She tells the story. She can't really help smiling in the middle of telling it on body cam, and also in terms of the interrogation. And then at the end of it, the officer says, can we get you a victim counselor? Because you're the victim here. Actually, Laurie was the initiator, the perpetrator, the predator. Laurie was definitely not the victim, right? But she managed to convince, despite laughing, she's saying how scary it is what Charles was doing, but smiling while she's saying it. While she's describing how horrible Charles was, she's kind of smiling. And the officer nevertheless accepts what she's saying. Because I think what Laurie keys into is, I don't know, like, sometimes if you've been divorced, then you have this thing that, you know what, be careful of men. Men are to be, you got to just be careful of them. You know what I mean? It's that you sort of key into that. We both women here, and we know what men are like. We actually, we know what men are really like, right? She's keying into that, and it's like, shouldn't the officer be doing an investigation, asking questions, not resonating with what Laurie is saying? But what you can see through that is how Laurie thought that she could get away with murder. Well, because she'd done it so many times before, she'd gotten away with making up stories so often. Now she was just doing it again. So Laurie convinces the officer that she was explaining things to, that she was the victim. What this shows isn't just how easily the officer can be convinced of an untrue story. An untrue story that nevertheless sounds plausible at face value. Oh, he was shouting. Oh, he was, you just have enough of those things. Well, that sounds good enough for me. At face value, you know what, that sounds right. Great. I'll accept what you're saying. It's only after intense scrutiny, after weeks and months go by, after second guessing long after the fact, and it does make you wonder if Kylie and JJ weren't killed, would Charles's murder have ultimately been unsolved, or would it have been regarded as just self-defense? If nobody else was murdered, would this have been a, like, what do they call it? You know, injustice. It makes you wonder how many cases like this where enough people say the same thing. Think about the Ramsey case. Here I am in Boulder right now. Well, you've got the father, mother, and brother hypothetically all saying the same thing. Oh, okay, well, then that must be what happened. Well, if enough people say the same thing, then that is what happened. Oh, okay. You know, there is something to that kind of makes sense, because the jury does exactly that as well. If enough members of the jury decide something unanimously, then that becomes the law. That becomes the truth. Is it true? I wonder whether we're going to have a time in future where we'll have AI as juries. I don't know what you guys think of that. Jersey Girl says it was very sad watching Charles's video. I mean, he's pleading for his life. He's saying, please stop this. Please help me. He's trying very hard to convince them of something that is a legitimate thing, and he fails. So here is some evidence that came about. I don't think I'd ever seen this before, but I saw it on the Dateline documentary. Do you guys recognize that? What are we seeing in that picture? Bridget, what do you mean by, sorry, Alina, what do you mean by just how you discovered the truth of Vincent van Gogh? What exactly? Yeah, you don't take it at face value. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, that is the top of the bat. And all, if you think about it, you had Hailey, Laurie, and Alex saying that that Charles went for the bat, and this was very belligerent. This is very threatening. A man holding a bat, it's like a life-threatening situation. And so Alex was able to turn around, go to his bedroom, get his gun, and shoot him twice, and situation averted. And but then you say, yeah, here are a couple of problems with that version of events. Does anyone else have any other injury? Lord, Laurie was apparently facing imminent attack. Does she seem traumatized? Does she seem shaken? Is she injured in any way? No. How about Tylee? Is Tylee crying? Is she traumatized? You know, theoretically, they both just escaped death. No. Is Alex traumatized or whatever? And this case reminds me of Henry van Breda, who after axe murdering his family, he took a knife and he made small little incisions on himself to show, oh, I was also caught up in the melee. I was also hurt. So Alex has got like an injury to the back of his head because he knows. Think about this: as um, gullible as he is, he knows that in order to convince the police, he's got to have something that at least shows um, a self-defense argument at face value. And so a little bit of blood in the back of his head. Oh, it looks like you were facing a life-threatening attack. Was he? Because one of the first things I thought when I heard about this was, I bet you Charles never touched the bat. I bet you that there's no bat in the story. You might say, yeah, yes, but Tylee said there was. I don't know what happened, but I bet you that Charles never had a bat in his hand whatsoever. And now the evidence has come out that they tested the bat and they found no definite evidence that Charles did touch the bat. Thanks, Selena. I got it. So yeah, I think so as well. Well, that was the problem, Sharon, is that they couldn't keep their story straight. And because they couldn't keep their story straight, the police did eventually catch up. Took them quite a long time. So no traces of Charles were found on the baseball bat that he brandished in his final moments. I thought Dateline did a good job showing how the timeline didn't add up, and that's often the Achilles heel of any criminal. They're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. They can't account for it, so the timeline doesn't add up. Well, guess what? In terms of this, it doesn't add up. Alex claims he called the cops very soon after the shooting. And I took this screen grab from the documentary. Can you see that? Just do that. Is asked by the 911 operator, how long ago did this happen? He says a couple of minutes. But actually called 911 after calling Laurie and after some significant time had passed. I think there's some estimates that he took about 45 minutes to call 911. What do you think he was doing during those 45 minutes? Well, one thing could be manufacturing an injury that's supposed to look like self-defense. So all of these little inconsistencies, and that is again what I thought Keith Morrison really addressed quite well. Is he was saying, at face value, it did look this way. Yeah, well, that's exactly the point. At face value, it's supposed to look this way. So you're telling me that when you design a cult, when you're designing a belief system, that you're not trying to create something that at face value looks that way as well? In other words, I'll go along with it because at face value, X, Y, and Z. I know just what buttons to press in a police interrogation, and then you'll accept what I'm saying without evidence, and then someone will get away with murder. Great. Okay, now let's take that and apply it to cult beliefs. We'll take all the things that we know which buttons to press, and then we'll just do X, Y, and Z as well. Isn't that exactly what happened? All of these little inconsistencies eventually add up to a different reality, one amounting to allegedly premeditated murder. So I'm now going to take, we've spoken kind of in a circle about Laurie Vella, about people who build societies, people who break societies, and then sort of try to think laterally and say, aren't there people like that in our societies right now? Aren't there people like that in our orbit right now? Right? are we able to tell the difference between doomsday garbage and legitimate, serious problems facing our society and our world? Are we able to do that? Are people around us able to do that? When COVID happened, could we trust ourselves and people around us to know what is the right way to deal with this kind of unknown situation? Miss Jane says, nice house, nice area, churchy people, nothing to see here. I can't wait to tell you guys about Boulder, just my first impressions of Boulder. Okay, so I'm going to sort of end off with two um, uh, subheadings, if I can put it that way. One is like a general thing. How do we build sustainable societies? And the same question is, how do we break them? How do we break families? How do we break people? How do we break, you know, communities? And then I want to talk about sex and death. The relationship is an ancient relationship that's always been there between sex and death. I mean, you can take true crime completely out the equation. Um, People are going to die no matter what, and people are going to live no matter what because people are having sex. So, sex and death, there's an inextricable link between the two anyway. But there's also a psychological link within sex and death that's really quite interesting, especially when you look at the nature side of it. Okay, so I want to start off by just talking about sustainable societies. I know it sounds very cerebral and ordinary. How do we build um, sustainable societies? Anyone want to try and answer that? Well, 70% say no, I didn't watch the Doomsday documentary. I think I need to do a, a separate review to this, just that goes through it a lot quicker. Terry says, in the animal kingdom, some mate then die. The strongest looking out for the weakest. Rich Buddy says, you build with civil and criminal codes. Okay. Let me bring myself back. Right. So think about about it in a really, really basic way. How did such a destructive cycle start? So Charles dies. Okay, but let's pull back from that. Tylee and JJ die. Let's pull back from that. Tammy dies. Let's pull back from that. How did this destructive cycle start? How does how does it what gives birth to it? And again, do you remember how I started this video? I was talking about driving down the highway past St. George. I'm in Utah. I'm sort of I think I'm passing Hurricane and I'm going past the place where Chad and Laurie first met. Okay. The question is, how did such a destructive cycle start? Let's make the question even simpler. How does something so destructive start? How does destructiveness start? It's a simple question. And I think the one version of the answer is love, that you love recklessly, that you love in an unrealistic way or want to be loved in an unrealistic way. I mean, that's the other thing. Wanting to be loved in an unrealistic way. I remember someone that I quite liked, nothing really happened between us, but she was telling me how this guy did everything for her. Like he opened the door, he took her kid to school. And I thought, um, Is that what you want? Someone who does literally everything for you, and that's the perfect guy? Like, is that really the perfect guy? Somebody does literally everything for you, and then you fall in love with him, and then does he stop? I mean, how does it work? Are you, by virtue of your looks or your personality, worthy of somebody who will just do literally everything? Okay, so is that what love is? Somebody who literally just, you know what I mean? It's also how you want to be loved that is part of this. That can be part of a destructive cycle. When Laurie was, think about how Brian Laundrie wanted to be loved, how Gabby Petito let certain things go that maybe she shouldn't have with Brian. I was actually at the that those sort of salt flats where they took some of their final video earlier today. Anyway, and I want to talk about that as well. When Laurie was 22 years old, so the question is, how does such a destructive cycle start? I think you could say the way we love and the way we want to be loved. But think about Laurie. She's 22 years old and she's already married to a second husband. She's 22, married for the second time. What do 5 marriages tell you? It tells you that there's a lot of building and then breaking. Let me just say that again. Just without knowing the details of this case, you could simply just say, here's someone who got married and divorced 5 times. It tells you about building and breaking. So building and then breaking, building and breaking. You have this family, and then it's torn apart. You put together this family, another family, and then it's torn apart again. What are we actually talking about when we talk about that? Can I tell you what it is in a single word? It's inconsistency. Is inconsistency a bad thing? Is consistency a good thing? Is consistency a good thing for health and for fitness and longevity? Is stability a good thing for that? Is inconsistency a good thing for love or for do you see what I'm getting at? I'm going to come back to just that word, but you've got this pattern of making something one moment and then abandoning it the next. And so Chad merely provided Laurie with another off ramp. Chad wasn't like the be all end all, the lover to end all lovers. He wasn't the greatest. He was simply another off ramp for Laurie when things got too dull for her liking. In her words, he's nuts and I just don't like him anymore. That's how she referred to Charles. Laurie, why are things not working out with Charles? Well, because he's nuts and I just don't like him anymore. Does that sound like the words of a mature person? Or does it sound like a teenager? Is like if you had been married for 10 years or 20 years, bear in mind you've been together for a long period of time. You know, you've had children with somebody, you've been ensconced in this marriage. And then you say, well, we're not together anymore. Why? Well, he's nuts and I just don't like him anymore. If you think that about somebody, and let's face it, you might think it quite regularly in a relationship. But if at any time you think that and then you immediately act on it, how consistent do you think you're going to be? But anyway, when she says he's nuts and I just don't like him anymore, that's actually code for I'm having an affair. And who are you going to believe is nuts, him or me? Laurie, if you think about it, again, the question is, how did such a destructive cycle start? Laurie was excited by the immediacy and the urgency of Chad's doomsday dogma. It was also simple. It was a simple thing. He had a main line to God. And it's like, it's simple, but it's also too good to be true. He had a main line to God. He could tell the future. He knew when the world was going to end and who and where those who were going to be saved would be. Simple. Bullshit, but simple. The shorter version of that is two middle-aged married people, two people that had both been parents and both been spouses for a very long time. They wanted a second life. They wanted a fresh start. They wanted fireworks. Remember, she's a 49-year-old ex-beauty queen and he is in his 50s. And what's there to look forward to? The long downhill, the long decay, the long slowing down, the long walk to a wheelchair or a rocking chair. No, they want one last um, fiery, triumphal, um, you know, adventure. That's what this is kind of all about. The rest is sort of noise and kind of hysteria. Colby said that Laurie made everything fun. Do you remember that? Laurie made everything fun, and now Chad was doing that for her. Laurie needed someone to make things fun for her. And that's exactly what Chad was doing. The world was theirs, well, his, but also hers. Not only that, it was exciting and interesting, but also fun. Colby said that Laurie had told him as a single mother that real problems didn't really matter. This is long before all of this stuff happened. Her son says that Laurie said, you know what? Don't worry about that stuff. Did that resonate with you guys when you watched the documentary? He basically said this, and I think it's a verbatim quote. He said that Laurie had told him when he was a little boy, when she was a single mother, these things won't matter much because the world's going to end. And so it's not our problem. We don't really have to worry about it. Funny enough, at the airport today, someone, there were like these bags, there was like three flights that sort of landed in Denver. Sorry, not, yeah, and they were all using the same carousel. And the carousel was just bumper to bumper bags. And this lady pulled the one bag out, realized it wasn't hers. And she seemed like quite a nice lady. And she just threw the bag back on. I wonder what she would have felt like if she saw someone doing that to her bag. When I was at the Bonneville Speedway, a dude walked by the counter and he just brushed off a cap and the cap fell on the ground. And I thought, did you really not notice that? Anyway, I bent down and I picked it up. You might say, you know, these little problems don't really matter. It's not my problem. Well, if it's not my problem, it's going to be someone else's problem. If the world's going to end, you know, we don't really have to worry about things. They're going to, the world's ending anyway. What if the world doesn't end? What if it just becomes extremely broken? So Laurie's world back in the day, think about this. I'm talking about way back when she was going from one marriage to the next. Laurie's world back in the day was an unstable world. She was facing kind of one apocalypse after the other. You know, a man sort of looks after her. That's the impression I get. Divorced, next man, to the extent that when Charles needs to be murdered, she murders him just to get his money. That's how desperate she is for something to take into her future because she's made nothing herself. One has the sense that she's built nothing and created nothing herself. if she's built a family, if she's built, she's had children and looked after them, well, she's destroyed that, and she's aware of that as well. So she she lived in an unstable world. She moved a lot, not only her but Colby as well. They lived in many apartments, much like the world of a traveling journalist. Remember that the question here is, how do we build sustainable societies, right? Well, this is how not to do it. How not to build sustainable societies or families or relationships. You have an unstable world. You move around a lot. You live in many apartments. Do kind of like what I'm doing. And today I had a very unstable day. A rootless existence can be traumatizing if each time you move, it's because somebody else cracks the whip. In other words, you don't have any agency. Everything in your life is someone else's fault, someone else exerting authority. You feel powerless. And that's why I've always said the main motive in this case is power, not greed. Although greed is, I think I've just pulled the plug out, the charger. Sorry about that. Although greed is important, and I think the fact that she has no money means she has no power, the problem is at the base of it, this is about power. I mean, why is she attracted to Chad? Because he's telling her she's this powerful figure. That's exactly what she needs to hear. Excuse me, that's exactly what she needs to know, wants to know. So brief friendships mean you're not anchored so that you can. Let me read this again. Brief friendships mean you're not anchored, so you make yourself up as you go along. And can this rootlessness ever translate to recklessness? I'm not sure if I'm doing justice to the script, having had 2 or 3 drinks. Anyway, can this rootlessness ever translate to recklessness? What do you think is the answer to that? That's also a good point. Another thing is it holding on to one another and having one another hold on, you know? Okay. My response to that is, can rootlessness translate to recklessness? Of course it does. When I can tell you, when you're driving every single day, I started when I was driving in America. I started extremely aware of, um, very alert. And yesterday, when I was driving to Wendover from Salt Lake City, I was almost falling asleep. So it's going from that hypervigilance to almost falling asleep at the wheel. Why? Because you've been driving every single day, because you've been rootless constantly, because you become wearied by that constant movement, that it becomes something that you that's now a dreary aspect. It's not so much something that you're noticing. I'm not saying that my travels to America have been dreary, just that I have done a heck of a lot of driving. So the answer is, of course it does. Of course it can lead to recklessness. And so the antidote to instability and tearing oneself out of one community after another, like one marriage after another, the antidote to breaking communities is consistency. Consistency is stability. And I'm going to share with you a really beautiful story about what can happen out of consistency that's takes us totally out of the Laurie Vallow case into Utah and into the world and into reality and into nature. Gloria, I'm glad to see that. Kathy says, if you don't agree with someone, still be kind. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Good point. You know, Mel, in my opinion, it's a parent's job, but especially a mother's job, to be a soother for their children, especially when their children are quite young. And some parents don't realize it, but they actually infect their children with their own anxieties. They they agitate their children with their own restlessness. In other words, a person may have a spirit about them that they're either prone to being calm or they're prone to being unsettled. And that can be transferred to a child simply by being mindless around a child. What a horrible gift to give a child, your child. Paige says, was this a case of the wrong person at the right time? Well, I would say, for us, the wrong person at the wrong time. For them, the right person at the right time, I guess. So my running coach, his favorite word of motivation was consistency. And ironically enough, it was Alex's favorite word as well. We used to call him Mr. Consistency. The camaraderie between his athletes is very dear to his heart, and his motto is bringing people together who have a passion for running. But the key there is, how do we build sustainable societies? Consistency. How do not to be stupid about it, but if you wanted to ask me, how do you become a successful YouTuber or author or successful at anything? Consistency. I think it says somewhere when you've done something for a certain amount of hours or days after one another, it might be how long it takes for a habit to form, how long it takes for you to become an expert at something. Consistency. Just spend a lot of time doing something specific. How to create a good society? Well, be consistently part of that society. Thanks, Kathy. Appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the last section here. And I don't know, I kind of got the heebie jeebies. That's actually the wrong word. I just, I don't know, it was something unexpected that stole upon me there was an epiphany within an epiphany. I don't know if you guys think I've overstated it to say that, what really happened here was someone created a a destructive society, right? Where someone created the formula to destroy society. That's what happened here. But within this epiphany, so that's actually what she did. She was the opposite of this guy that I really that we loved as a group, um, who built our community and who gave so much to it. She was the opposite. She and so this is the epiphany within the epiphany. I wrote a book about the world ending and someone inheriting the world. The whole idea was to say, because bear in mind, my mother died, and my mother was actually into a lot of the same stuff that Laurie was. And so I think when I wrote the book, it was it was to soothe myself, because the idea was life goes on after the end of the world. In other words, and I mean, it was quite funny when I was hiking through Kolob Canyon in the Zion National Park. You had all these people stopping at the stream crossings because they're too scared to, get their shoes wet. And I would just walk by them and say, this is another thing you could do: face your fear, get your shoes wet. It's a hot day. Yes, there's a little bit of discomfort, but um, you know, life goes on after the end of the world. You get your feet wet. It's not the end of the world. And so I was just saying that that is the nature of things, that worlds do end, lives do end. The living die and survivors take over. So I hope when you are listening to this part, you can kind of unplug a little bit, just almost like turn the page, right? And get what I'm saying to you. Not true crime rocket science, not a true crime channel, not whatever somebody talking in the Laurie Vallow case. What I, as a person, am saying directly to you about life. The living die and survivors take over. But that's completely different from inventing fictional scenarios of the world ending and then killing people in real life to defend your character in that fiction. So there's the nature of things where the living die and survivors take over. But then there's a completely fictional thing where you say that that's going to happen, and you decide who's going to take over. That's not right. So Laurie and Chad's love affair was cloaked in religion, as Keith Morrison said, cloaked in religion that brought in death, a religion that brought in death. But it's really not the first time we see sex and death as a theme. Yesterday, I drove past the world's biggest living organism. I'm still gobsmacked by just this idea. Let me put this on screen. Thanks, Selena. Let me put this on screen. You know what you're looking at when I do that. Thanks a lot. Do you know what you're looking at there? So yesterday I drove past the world's biggest living organism. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden. You're passing by. It's like big tree in Pandora, but it's basically this huge rippling living carpet of life. It's this heartbeat in a way of the world, right? And this is what it is. It is an aspen forest weighing about 6,000 tons, apparently 14,000 years old, comprising about 50,000 individual stems. It might be like 42,000, but basically somewhere around there. Over 106 acres. And all of them are connected through the same root system. That is why it's one organism, right? As human beings, we are all connected through a common history. We've got a common, not only a common ancestor, but we've got a common backstory where we had to survive plagues. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of years ago. We had to survive plagues and all sorts of things. But what you have here, let me put it on full screen. The Plano forest comprises trees that normally have a lifespan of 130 years. This system have transcended time and doomsday. Like what would normally destroy trees or forests, things like disease, fire, insects, whatever. This forest has withstood. It's become, I don't want to say immortal, but it's definitely become something special. They regard this forest as about 14,000 years old. That's a lot older than 130 years. And so how have they managed to achieve that? How is this one tree that becomes another tree that becomes another tree that becomes a forest? how did it manage to do this? How did this organism grow to become such a successful community? How do we grow and become such a successful community? Well, how about consistency, stability, access to a large body of water known as the Fish Lake, and yes, cloning, but cloning kind of by choice. And wanting to participate in the community that you're in. You know, um, your life enhances mine. My life enhances yours. What did Terry say? Yeah, there you go. Each clone is an equal contributor to the society, but it has to be said if one clone gets sick, if one tree becomes sick, it risks the entire system. So the other reason why this community of trees are successful is because they're quite remote. I mean, I've struggled to get to them, let alone find them. The remote setting of the forest is another reason why it survived this long, including from human destruction. Um, I suppose you could say the remote setting for Chad and Laurie's, in Rexburg, can also be a reason why something extreme is allowed to take root. But the difference is you've got stability and consistency here. Over a long, long, long period of time with Chad and Laurie, you had instability and inconsistency giving root to cloning. In other words, out of a backstory, a fabric of death and instability, well, no wonder they came up with a psychology and a belief system of death and destruction. According to one source, the forest has actually dealt with disease in the past, wildlife, grazing, um, but it remains the world's largest scientifically documented organism. And what was so incredible yesterday was driving by this one moment, and then the next moment, this. It really was quite extraordinary. I don't know whether people in Utah are aware of it. I don't know if Americans are aware of it, but it's literally like going from utopia in a sense, in a sense of nature. Utopia, um, kind of a tropical, I know it's not tropical, but a kind of a tropical abundance of life to an absolutely dead, sterile, flat, empty landscape. From that to that, from that to that. And I couldn't help feeling when I was standing on these salt flats, and it like turned my feet completely white, um, like almost like white stain, like I stood in white paint. You kind of get the sense that wow, uh, the end of the world is possible. Nothingness, and because this almost looks like a graveyard. Nothing is alive there. It's possible. It's part of, there are deserts in our world where there is no life. We've got an entire moon where nothing is alive on it. So, a world that has no life is totally possible. But so is a world with life, and incredibly abundant life. I mean, this is a world that is transcending death. This forest is supposed to, each one of these trees is only supposed to live 130 years. This system is 14,000 years old. In a weird way, we are only supposed to live whatever it is, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years. And yet we live through the lives of others. We benefit from the wisdom and the work and the efforts of others. Today, I caught an Uber in another electric vehicle. I didn't do any work on an electric vehicle other than writing an article once upon a time. We stand on the shoulders of giants. In a weird way, in our moment of being alive, we are kind of immortal. We share in incredible achievements over a long period of time if we participate in this idea of community. Silent Murmur says life may require an atmosphere that makes it possible. Well, part of that atmosphere is stability. Part of that atmosphere is consistency. I'm just saying, in order for these trees to become this, they needed a stable and consistent environment, but they also needed to be stable and consistent. So, can you see how stability, consistency, and a common purpose can create not only a successful individual, but a successful society? You know, I would say this is not rocket science, but maybe it is. We're looking for the secret ingredients to an incredible life, but how complicated and difficult is something like stability? Like, how hard is that to figure out? How hard is consistency to figure out? Consistency in practice is actually quite difficult, but once you're consistent, it gets easier, especially if you've not been consistent. But those, yeah, there you go. It leads to continuity. Just think about how inconsistent Laurie was in her marriages and what destruction that led to, what instability that led to. Why can't my instability be your instability? So I suppose one could say that the organism doesn't tolerate diversity in terms of these woods, and that it grows to some extent at the expense of other trees, which it crowds out. But one thing it doesn't do is destroy itself. Can you see that? One thing that these woods don't do is destroy itself, and that is something we seem to be uniquely capable of and uniquely playing games with self-destruction. There are so many, I've driven across America, and there are so many movies playing right now in cinemas that are about um, the end of the world and about kind of big biblical ideas. I don't know. Let me just. I don't know if you guys have noticed um, the movies that are playing kind of at the moment. Have you guys noticed what they are? Yeah, I mean, Laurie saw consistency as boring, as dull, as um, death, I guess. So, as I say, just a short drive up the road from the world's largest living organism is this. And that is why life and death, sex and death are so close to one another. You can't have one without the other. And so, in the same way that this goes on for miles, well, that's probably a bit of an exaggeration. This goes on extensively. This goes on, definitely does go on for miles. And it soon becomes hard to simply stay awake because it's so endless. It's hard to simply stay awake driving through this monotonous, monochrome landscape. This is a sterile desert. It's the end of mountains. It's the end of everything. It's flat, it's featureless, nothing grows in it. It's dead. There's virtually no living thing out here. And I'm about to finish now, during my journey across America, I've seen and heard conversations all over about climate change. I didn't start these conversations. I stumbled into them. Roads have been closed north, south, east, and west because of unseasonable weather and storms. I've come into Boulder and it's kind of smoky. The the Salt Lake City that I arrived in yesterday and left today is also smoky. And I thought, oh, is that what happens when the wind blows the salt and it creates this strange atmosphere? No, it's actually clouds of smoke blowing in from fires in Canada right now. Those same clouds of smoke that are in Salt Lake City, if you fly uh, for an hour, you're still in those same clouds of smoke in Boulder, Colorado. The picture you see on screen right now is the road closed to the Narrows in Zion National Park, one of many roads that I encountered that were closed in my efforts to follow the journey of Brian and Gabby and Brian, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. Why was this road closed? Because of the threat of flash floods, because there's been unseasonable rain that's leading to dangerous floods. And so that then brings me to the concluding remarks. And I want to kind of address this to you. I'm looking at you when I'm saying this. Can we tell the difference between doomsday cult stuff, right? Can we tell the difference between doomsday cult stuff and the subtle clues that we're supposed to pay attention to? In other words, can we tell the difference between the nonsense, the doomsday crap, as um, Nate Eaton said, that I think the defense mentioned, the ridiculous bunkum? Can we tell the difference between that stuff and the stuff that we're supposed to pay attention to? The subtle, in other words, it's kind of coming back to Charles. Can we do better than what the police did, but in terms of the real world? Can we, when Charles comes up to us, do we know how to deal with reality, or do we face it with like the look on this lady's face, disbelief? Can we tell the difference between doomsday cult stuff and the subtle clues that we're supposed to pay attention to? What do you think? Can we? Can we tell the difference? Can we tell the difference? Can you tell the difference? Are we at this point telling the difference? Are we successfully telling the difference? Not sure. That sounds like a quote from The Dark Knight. Zircon says, I'd like to think I can, not quite sure what you said there. Lois says, I hope so. Lois, are you the same Lois that I saw in Boise? I hope so. Aren't we programmed to do that? Aren't we programmed to turn a blind eye to the things that we either don't want to see or don't understand? I mean, hasn't a lot of the true crime community just decided not to pay attention to this case because it's a little bit hard to understand, and it goes into that area which is where angels fear to tread, belief systems? Well, we wouldn't want to be unpopular in that area. Yeah, it does. And you kind of get the idea that people want their fears fed. Now, if there's narcissistic supply, isn't there people? Aren't there people who want anxiety supply? Yeah, I thought so. Dark Knight. Kat Kruger says, does the civil society need more or less law enforcement trained in mental health intervention? Um, I don't know if it's mental health. I think it's human behavior, but um, is it their job to do that? I think what's very destructive to civil society is the popularity of being of disrespect to law enforcement. Um, I think it's dangerous to have a sense of distrust in law and order. That's going to create instability. That's going to create inconsistency. Lois, good to have you here. Iceland says we stop growing and can't adapt if we don't open our eyes and accept reality. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you as a traveler, when you say, it's okay, I'm going to make mistakes. It's okay, I don't know the answers, but I'm going to step forward anyway. That's when you have good experiences. When you're forever trying to protect yourself as a traveler, you limit your experience. It's kind of, but of course, there's a level where you can't be stupid about it either. There you have it. If you feed something, it grows. Yep, I agree. Okay. Does anyone want to hear my story of getting here today? I'm actually a little bit too tired to tell it, to be honest. Anyway, I'm done with the script. So those of you who came here for that are welcome to head elsewhere. I kind of want to do a brief review of the Dateline documentary on Brian Koberger, but much tighter, not 2 hours. So maybe I'm going to do that tomorrow, but we'll see. Wendy, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. Beautiful little town. I mean, we all know that it is, but seeing it directly, it is. Okay, so today I had to get from Wendover, so you can Google that if you like. Maybe I can show it to you here. I had to get from Wendover, um, which is west of of Salt Lake City, right? And yeah, here's the map. Yeah, so today to get from Wendover, that's there, 117 miles to Salt Lake City Airport. And if I wanted to make it easy, I would have just simply driven there. Um, shall I make it a bit bigger? But I kind of didn't want to just because I'd arrived at Wendover the night before. I hadn't really looked around very much. So I kind of wanted to look around, but the problem was I had to get some serious packing done. I'd bought a lot of little a shirt here, a cap there, and I needed to give the vehicle back and also have everything packed in my bag so that I could fly, right? And so getting everything packed and then also working on the script and getting the data off my phone and making space on my computer, all of that meant that I got a relatively late start. And even so, I thought I would go to the Bonnievale Salt Flats, which is right here. I think, where's that road? There you can see it over there. It's basically just a little causeway. It's strange that they don't. There you can see it. Just kind of a causeway going across here. This is where they race really big engines on this flat surface. And so I was just curious to see that. And then I took some photos there. And anyway, the next thing I saw, I was going to be late for my flight. I'm not going to make it back in time. And so that's when the thing happened. Can you see that? I I do start driving slightly above the speed limit just to make back 2 or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever. And because I'm quite a conscientious, I don't know if it's conscientious or just isn't that what you do? I put fuel in over here. I put fuel in over there, and then that that took off another couple of that added a couple of minutes, and then obviously by the time I got uh, 80 miles, I realized I'm going to need to put fuel in again. You've got to give the vehicle back fully fueled. I sort of feel like that was a mistake. I should have just given the vehicle back, 80% fueled. What happened when I got here? So part of it, part of this whole thing was driving like faster than I've driven before, but not that. I wasn't really going faster than other drivers on the road. But I was trying to make back time. I was trying to make back, 5 minutes or whatever. And then I had the brilliant idea to put fuel in again, which I did. I think it was somewhere here. Yeah, I think it was somewhere here. I put fuel in here, and then I remember turning off here. Here's the comfort in, and then I put fuel in there, and then I took a wrong. I didn't think you could get back onto the road yet, so I took a wrong turn this way. That added again another 2-3 minutes. Anyway, long story short, I was basically arriving at the airport with exactly 1 hour before my flight was due to leave, right? Are you following? So I'm in a scenario where when I arrive at the airport, it's going to be exactly 1 hour. But I've never been to this airport before. I don't know where to. I don't know where the rental areas are because I've never been there before. So this is going to require me to do everything almost perfectly, right? Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble. So anyway, from at least from that point onwards, when I filled up, I did manage to. I mean, you just follow your navigator, but funny enough, the navigator didn't have car rentals on it. But I did manage to at least not make any mistakes from there. Follow the rental return signs into Salt Lake International. Parked the car, got my bags, but this is where it gets quite tricky. This is not the smallest airport in the world, and you are now entering an airport that you've never been in before, and you've now got 50 minutes to get from you know, the exterior of it to your plane. You've got 50 minutes, but you've never been in this airport before. So I get into the terminal and I see 3 terminals for United Airlines and they're all empty. And I think that means they've closed and sorry, you missed your flight and you can actually start booking another flight. And I'm actually starting to look on my phone for some some information. When fortunately I went closer to the counter and I saw um, a little sign there saying these counters aren't manned. Go to the third level or something like that. Now I don't know where the third level is. And anyway, so I end up fortunately going straight to where the counter is. I just end up going fortunately in the right direction. I do ask one or two people for help, and as I get there, the lady says, "You almost didn't make it." Anyway, she then weighs my bag, and my bag. They put this on my bag. My bag weighs 56 pounds, and she says, "You want to open your bag and get rid of the 6 pounds? Maybe carry it or whatever." Because if not, that we're going to charge you $100 for the 6 pounds, for being 6 pounds overweight. And I just thought, I don't have any space in my other bags, and that bag was in any way quite difficult to close. I just thought I don't have time to do this. And then she said, "Do you know it's a mile from here to your plane?" Now it's already now it's sort of 45 minutes before the airplane takes off. So now I've paid $100, and I mean the whole flight barely cost $200. Now I paid $100 just for my bag. Um, and what happened after that? Then I went through one of the longest processings I've ever gone through, where my bag simply didn't come out. I've got a bag with a laptop in it, but the bag simply didn't come out. I was just waiting. I don't know whether they did some kind of anyway. And so eventually the bag came out, and now I had basically 20 minutes to get to my terminal. And I still want to show you photos of how long this line is, just keeps going. Lisa Wilson was telling me how this endless corridor, yeah, and I mean, the guy at the hotel had said, yeah, don't worry about it. Salt Lake City International is not a big airport. You'll be fine. And according to my watch, I thought, I've only walked half a kilometer so far. There's no way I'm gonna there's no way I'm gonna get to my flight on time. And then almost like magic, when I turned a corner, although I'd been walking a long time, the terminal was right there. No one was sitting there. And as I got there, the guy said, "Are you here for this flight? Because we're about to close." And so I said, "Yes." And so I was literally like, as I arrived there, I was sort of like lost. And, I think it's sometimes luck of the draw. Sometimes um, the gods smile on you and you're lucky and things kind of turn out. And other times they just don't. I mean, if I'd taken one wrong turn and gotten lost for 3 more minutes, I don't think I would have made it. Sharon says this needs to be made into a movie. So that wasn't the end of it. So then I fly into Denver, and I suddenly realize it's Sunday. It's Sunday today, and I've thought to myself, I don't want to hire. I've just hired a car for more than 2 weeks, which has caused a certain amount of financial hemorrhage. I'm going to catch an Uber to my hotel. Well, guess what? The Ubers are like $60 is the cheapest one. So I contacted someone I know in Bolden, and she said, $60, that's a bargain. And so when I went back onto Uber, it was now $112 or whatever. And so I thought, cheap, if it's going to be over $100 just to get from the airport to the hotel, I might as well hire a rental again, even though I don't really want to. So I quickly went online, and can you believe it? There was a deal, $75 for 3 days. And of course, by the time I kind of went in there, it didn't say no South Africans, but it only opened to Americans and Canadians. So I was speaking to a lady who's sort of at airport information while I'm standing there. A lady's walking a dog, and the dog craps right there in the like diarrhea, like right there in front of us. So the lady says, "Sorry, I can't help you now. I've got to deal with this." And so I sort of came to the rescue, and I sort of found a sign that showed one of those sort of mobile signs that showed, I think, baggage claim that way. And I just moved the sign right where the crap was so that people didn't step into it. Yeah, I mean, Miss Jane's laughing, but this really did happen. So anyway, that's now been taken care of. The husband comes along and he's like, "Where did my wife go?" And I said, "That direction," because that's he obviously took the dog outside. Anyway, from there, I asked the lady, "Okay, so how can what's an alternative way of getting to Bolden?" She says, "Well, there's an AB bus. It only costs you about $10, but you need to go that way, that way, that way, that way through this labyrinth to find out at what time it leaves, and it only leaves once every hour." And I said, "I don't want to go all that way in that direction to find out what time it leaves, and then we're to come all the way back to go that way, and then I might as well just rent a car." So I spent quite a long time trying to get that sorted out. But even if you did rent a car, you had to catch a rental shuttle. So the rental place isn't actually where the airport is, which is a nightmare. In the end, I think she Googled the bus times, and I saw that I had 20 minutes, and I thought, well, that's actually perfect. And then I went downstairs, and that's when the next weird thing happened. Um, I I just wanted to know, like, do you need to buy a ticket can you buy a ticket on the bus, or do you need to buy a ticket somewhere else? No one seemed to know the answer to the question, and yeah, it's like, I'm not from here, I don't know. And so eventually the answer was yes, you did need to buy a ticket. And so I put my card in, pressed all the buttons, and then said transaction cancelled. I did the same thing about 5 times, transaction cancelled. Then I went to someone who magically appeared and said, "Can you please help me?" And she said, "Are you not from here?" or something like that. Are you is it an international card? So I said, yes. So she said, "That explains it." So I said, "Well, my bus is leaving in about 10 minutes. I think at that stage it was about 5 minutes. Um, she said, "Well, you can pay with cash." So I said, "Well, I've only got $3." And then I took out $100 note. And she said, "No, it doesn't take $100 note." So I had $3. The bus ticket's $10. I had $3 and I had $100, but it doesn't take the $100 note, but it doesn't take my card either. So now I was thinking, am I going to be able to, like, because there's a shop around the corner, I'm going to be able to, like, run there? Do I leave my bags behind? Ask them to break a $100 note, run back, and then will I be able to? There's a queue by these kiosks, and then will I be able to get back to the bus terminal all within like about 5 minutes? And I thought that's very, very unlikely. And so bless her, that the lady said, I'm going to do something. And so she took out her own personal bank card and paid the $10. And I could have actually kissed her. I just said, I've had a really rough day and you've made it a lot less rough. Thank you very much. And so I gave her the $3 and she said, hold on to that $100 or something like that. And then I hightailed it to the bus, and I caught that bus with maybe a minute to spare. But I swear the bus drivers now wins the award for the most nasty American that I've yet had to deal with. Um, I don't know. He just It's just me and another guy who arrived late, and we weren't late. It was like 1 minute to spare, and he said that. He said, "You guys have got 1 minute," and And then he wanted to know where I was going. So I said, I'm going to the blah, blah, blah. And then he said, I don't know where that is. So now I quickly look on my phone and he's like, can you get on the bus? And anyway, he was just really nasty and like I've got some bottles in my bag that's sort of like stuffed in. And despite the chaos of the way I've moved around today, the bottle never got dislodged. But just in one foul moment, him basically throwing the bag into the compartment of the bus, it actually came out. Um, I don't really know. Like first of all, I need to know where to get off, and he needs to know where I'm getting off. You know, but anyway, so I was saying to him, I need to get off at this street, and he just looked at me, just like I've now run completely out of patience with you. And I was like, and then he just gave me this look, and I guess the look was get onto the bus. It was just really nasty, really, really nasty. And then I got onto the bus, and I was like, felt like I was quite traumatized. And I wanted to ask the folks on the bus, okay, so what happens now? Are we going to Boulder? Where are we going in Boulder? Whatever. But everyone was like in their own little world. Everyone had headphones on. So I thought, I'm just gonna be calm and whatever. And so while I was on the bus, I just checked Uber every couple of minutes. And as we got closer to Boulder, the Uber rate got less and less and less, from $80 to $60 to $20. And then I just thought, I think I'm going to get off this bus earlier, early, because I'm scared that because he'd some of my stuff had fallen out of my bag. I'm scared he's going to be so rough when he pulls out a bag, some of my stuff's going to come out. And so when the Uber rate, when the first stop happened, the first stop, no one got off. The second stop, the Uber rate was $16. I thought, okay, that's my cue. And so I got off there, ordered an Uber for $16, and then got myself to my hotel. How's that for a story? Yeah, look, I think that bus dude, his world is being on schedule. He's like the white rabbit, and for him, I don't know whether maybe he gets his pay docked if he's late, but yeah, I also don't know if it's like a Boulder thing. You're not from around here, are you? I don't know what's it all about, but like, so what are you supposed to do? And there's almost like nowhere I could have been. Are you guys there? Can you guys hear me? Ison says, love a happy ending to this. So anyway, when I got to my hotel, believe it or not, I hadn't actually eaten a single thing the entire day. The only thing I'd had a little cup of water in the plane. So I was just like, I know I'm doing a live, but I need some sustenance. I've had a tough day, and so that's why I went to Pastor Jay's, and food was delicious. What a beautiful town this is! Just driving through the town, and I also had certain little epiphanies exploding in my mind while we were driving there. Just things that I was seeing that made sense from having written books about this a million miles away. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys. So yeah, today it's funny when I was driving to the airport, I was thinking, I haven't flown for a while. I'm kind of looking forward to it. It ended up being this. I must say, I was actually very lucky. I think it could have turned out to be everything could have turned out to be a lot worse. I actually count myself extremely lucky. Um, yeah, um, extremely lucky. Kathy says, I'm so traumatized for you. Thank you. Yeah, it definitely was. Like when I got into the first Uber, the guy said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm a little traumatized." I don't know what he thought. Like, you wimp, you're not going to last long in Colorado. Anyway, thanks a lot, Cornelia. Yeah, it definitely was a tough day, but you get an idea why it's hard to make lives. I mean, I made this live because, first of all, I'd committed to doing it, but I'd also written a script already. If I hadn't put a script together, I would have just been, look, I'll postpone it. So, but by the way, I want to do a Van Gogh letters tomorrow. Um, and I want to share pictures of um, that little house with a tree that some of you've seen on Instagram. There's just a beautiful piece of video I took that shows the shifting perspectives and how an artist will look at a scene and find the right perspective. So that's something I want to share with you in Van Gogh letters. I think it's 57. And then the pictures I took at the salt flats. I think that's something very stark and different. Um, it's like a page of paper, and a human being is a period or a comma on it. It does speak to the human condition. Yeah, so we were talking about community and how others help us. I mean, um, that lady really came to my rescue. She didn't know me, and she really helped me, and I really appreciate what she did. Um, yeah, it was a really good gesture. Yeah. Basia, if you're not in, are you in America? If you're not in America, I don't think you're going to be able to watch it. Oh, Iceland says I went back to the salt flats in 2019. So I must tell you that the Fish Lake, this is specifically to you, Iceland, the Fish Lake National Park was closed yesterday and I presume today as well. So I actually didn't, although I saw some little pieces of forest here and there, I never actually saw that world's biggest organism. And I've also now not seen the fungus. I think it's called honey mushrooms or something, which is in eastern Oregon. So I'm going to have to come back to Utah and come back to Oregon to see this stuff. Um, I if I've been dumb about one thing, I've pre-booked quite a few flights and things, and so I can't just. Some of them aren't like you don't have the option of canceling. So I'm going to have to come back to America to look at a forest and fungus. We hid a treasure there, really. Okay. Okay. Honey mushrooms. Yeah. Cassie, where do you live? Honey mushrooms do sound amazing. It does feel quite miraculous. It definitely does feel quite miraculous. Sharon, don't worry. I had a delicious meal at Pastor Jay's. Actually, had exactly the same thing I had at Pastor Jay's in Moab. It was really good. 20 minutes from Portland. Oh yeah, I remember. Well, I'll give you a heads up, more of a heads up when I come back than I have this time. Yeah, like her face lit up when I said to her with total sincerity, I said, I've had a really rough day and you've really helped make it less rough. And because it really was a dilemma. She could see it. Like, I had a small amount of change and I had a large amount of change that was too large. I had a card, but it didn't work. Time was running out. What was going to happen? So anyway, Elaine Rudnicki, good morning from France. Good to see you, Elaine. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I think that's going to be about it from me. I actually can't believe I've been up here for 2 hours 40 minutes. Must have been partially alcohol fueled. Yeah, I just want to talk about that quickly. I mean, I do want to do an assessment of my trip to America. But touch wood, and there's some wood right here in front of me. Um, I feel very lucky that, first of all, I feel lucky that I'm able to do what I'm doing. I feel very fortunate, and I owe a lot of that to you guys. I mean, I owe all of that to you guys. The only reason why I'm saying it in a fraction way is, well, there's people who aren't watching that I also owe it to. Um, right now. But I feel very fortunate that I didn't get sick. I've tempted fate by 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 kind of pushing quite hard, like either driving till late at night or not getting enough sleep or not eating or whatever. And sometimes being in quite stressful situations, and that's never good for your immunity. But I mean, I'm mostly relieved that I've traveled through airports and been on planes and been on buses and been in courtrooms and mixed with people, and I haven't really gotten sick. I haven't gotten the flu. I haven't caught a cold. I have sometimes felt like I've had headaches here and there, but I haven't been like bedridden. I haven't like had a single day that I've been like, okay, I'm not well. I feel very fortunate in terms of that. Yeah, I like spending time with you. Bridget says I must really do things. You must. Thanks a lot, Iceland. Yeah, good to see that. Thanks, Sally. Random acts of kindness. Chelsea says, because you're in good health. I also think I am in fairly good health, but I also think I've been managing myself a little bit better. Um, I try and make sure I get enough sleep when I can. Like I'll be a bit sleep deprived, but then I make sure somewhere that I rest. I might not eat very healthily, but then eventually I'll eat something that is healthy. Make sure I get some vegetables. Kenny Rogers had posted is sold saying, I spent the night with Kenny Rogers. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest bummers is traveling. You in a hotel, you're paying to be there, and you're not well, right? Thanks, Selena. Um, Thanks, Cornelia. Thanks very much. I'm so happy for you and giving us an update. Um, so that was one thing I was really grateful for. What was the other thing? Yeah, I think I was really grateful to you guys, to um, Lisa and Webb and Stephanie and Terry and Iceland. Am I leaving anyone out? But yeah, I've what really made this trip. Oh, and obviously the folks in Boise. What really made this trip fun is just uh, you know meeting some of you guys in person, but also it really I really enjoyed being with Webb and Lisa is always a hoot to be around and getting to see her life and where she lives and meeting her little doggy who hates me. All of that has been a real joy, and so I'm kind of hoping that out of a digital community, out of a social media community, we can actually start creating a real community. You know, that meet face to face and do things together, and so it's not just keyboard warriors that we actually um, you know actually have experiences together that are worth something. Thanks a lot, Wendy. Thank you. I'm don't laugh when I say this, but I sort of feel like I might be changing my mind about coming to America to watch the Artemis 2 rocket launch just because I don't think it's going to be on schedule. I think, like when I was in Thousand Oaks, Webb said to me, the rocket launch is going up all the time. In fact, there was one that I missed that was early on a Thursday morning. It was like 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning or 3 a.m. So I don't know. I think we can just choose a rocket launch somewhere in California, maybe, and make that the symbolic get together. You know, other than because otherwise you choose something in Florida and and then it's postponed, and then what? You know. Sally says, are there cold cases that are still solvable that we can go over? Um, now, what do you mean? Of course, of course. V Slim says, I'm from California. Okay. Sally says, how about solve some upcoming crimes with clues that we will be given by police? You must remember the police are, what's the word? They're the authorities to solve and investigate and prosecute crimes, right? Um, so I don't mind when there's a trial, uh, participating in that and offering, and I've done that in the past. I don't mind in that situation, but I really don't think the authorities would appreciate that kind of thing. Um, but who knows? The Suzanne Morphew case, I think, could do with some progress. What do you guys say? That's also a case that seems to have just been forgotten about, and definitely bugs me. Or I don't know what you guys think. I mean, we've just passed Mother's Day. Did anyone remember Suzanne Morphew? Vasia says, been an interesting session. Well, Gloria, don't you miss real interactions? I mean, digital is cool, but don't you miss the real world and real interactions? Sounds good. Susan says I did. Okay. Okay, so we had 2:49. I'm gonna sign off. Did I miss something here? Iceland says my brother-in-law is a hunter. I went on a trip once. I saw him. I saw what can be done. I'm afraid she won't ever be found. Yeah, I know what you're talking about there. Yeah. Um, Nick, did you know Jennifer Coffindaffer posted a tweet about joining a Zoom call for Brian Koberger's pre-trial tomorrow? Um, yeah, you see, the problem is if I cover something like that, then I can't cover Boulder. I can't kind of do both of those at once. So there's certain occasions where I'm prepared to sort of be stuck behind the keyboard and listening and watching, but for the most part, I'm trying to absorb what's around me and move around me and sort of be animated. It's not like I don't want to do any of that, but it's I don't want to be doing that too often. As far as I know, there's not going to be very much. Um, I don't think there's going to be very much when Koberger appears. So I tend to not pay too much attention to those things anyway. Yeah, I mean, I actually wouldn't mind traveling with a local, but I wouldn't mind. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't mind actually asking them what is happening in the case and just see how they react. Funny enough, there's a story just today saying that that they feel Barry was very good friends with certain cops. Make of that what you will. Let's see if I can find that. I think I may even have emailed it to myself. Yeah, yeah, it is. I think it's this story. I don't know whether I believe this. I'm not sure what you guys think. What do you guys think of that story? Barry Morphy was friendly with cops, which may have botched investigation. But I mean, the other side of it is why is this investigation taking so long? Why is it so weird? Okay. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for joining me. I'll see you guys. I'm here for a little while. I'm going to be in quite a stable situation. I'm going to be here for a couple of days, so I will try to be around on my channels more than I have been. But look out on Team Peachtree for Van Gogh letters number 57. That's definite for tomorrow. Besides that, I'm not quite sure. We'll see. I do want to review the Dateline documentary of the Idaho student murders. So not sure when I'll do that, but that is something I do want to do. Gloria said, I hope to get some beauty sleep. Okay, I'm going to let you do that. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. For those who gave super chats, thank you, thank you, thank you. For those who stayed for the whole 3 hours, really appreciate it. And yeah, I appreciate you guys as my core community. Yeah, thanks for being here, and I'll see you guys next time. Sleep well, sweet dreams.